Sarah sat across from me at the small wooden table in our living room, her hands trembling with excitement as she struggled to hold back tears of joy. I could see her eyes shining, filled with a kind of happiness I hadn't seen in a long time. She leaned forward, her voice soft but overflowing with emotion, and whispered, "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the words seemed to hang in the air between us, floating like something fragile and powerful at the same time. Most husbands, upon hearing such news, would feel their hearts leap with pride and overwhelming happiness. Most men would immediately imagine the tiny fingers of a child, the laughter filling their homes, and the beginning of a new chapter in life. But for me it was nothing like that. Instead of joy, my heart sank heavily into the pit of my stomach. I felt a rush of panic, confusion, and even fear. I tried to smile, but the corners of my lips refused to move. My chest felt tight, as if invisible chains were pulling me down. The truth was painful, and it burned in the back of my mind like a secret I could never escape. I knew something Sarah did not. I knew something that turned her words from a celebration into a cruel reminder of what I could never have. The truth was simple but devastating. I could never father a child. For years I had carried this burden silently. Doctors had confirmed it when I was younger, telling me there were complications that left me infertile. It wasn't something I spoke about often, not even with Sarah. At first, I had wanted to tell her before we got married, but fear stopped me. I was terrified that if she knew, she might not choose me. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could live a happy life together without children, or perhaps one day find another way like adoption. I buried the truth deep inside me, convincing myself that love would be enough. But now here she was sitting across from me, glowing with happiness as she announced the one thing I thought could never happen. I could see her already imagining tiny clothes, late-night lullabies, and the future we had never dared to dream. She believed she was giving me the greatest gift, but inside me, questions were exploding like fireworks in the dark. If I could never father a child, then whose child was she carrying? The thought struck me like a knife. My hands began to tremble under the table, and I clenched them into fists to hide the shaking. I didn't want her to notice the storm raging inside me. I forced myself to breathe slowly to keep calm, because the last thing I wanted was to break her moment of happiness. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't push away the thoughts screaming in my head. Was it possible that the doctors had been wrong all these years? Could a miracle have happened? Or was there another explanation? One that would tear my heart apart and shatter the life we had built together? As Sarah reached across the table and touched my hand, her fingers warm and full of love, I felt torn between two worlds. On one side was the woman I loved more than anything, smiling at me with pure innocence. On the other side was the dark shadow of doubt, whispering that something was terribly wrong. I wanted to believe her, to believe us. I wanted to hold on to the possibility that maybe life had finally blessed us in an unexpected way. But deep inside, the truth I had carried for years was unshakable. My body could never create life. And if that was true, then the baby growing inside her could not be mine. In that moment I realized that my world had changed forever. Whether it was a miracle or a betrayal, nothing would ever be the same again. 3 years ago, I sat in a doctor's office that smelled faintly of disinfectant and echoed with the hum of machines. The air felt heavy that day, as though even the walls were waiting to hear what the doctor would say. I had gone in with a nervous hope, clinging to the idea that maybe all my fears were nothing but imagination. But when the doctor looked at me with quiet seriousness, his words cut through every layer of denial I had built. He told me I was infertile. The way he said it was calm, professional, almost routine for him, but for me it was as though the floor had collapsed beneath my feet. The word infertile echoed in my head again and again. It was more than just a medical condition, it felt like a life sentence. In that single moment, all the dreams I had quietly carried about fatherhood, about holding a child of my own, about passing down my name and my love, vanished like smoke in the wind. I tried to sit there with dignity, nodding and pretending to understand the medical explanations, but inside I was breaking apart. When I left the clinic that day, I didn't walk out as the same man. Something inside me had shifted permanently. I told myself over and over that life still had meaning, that family could exist in many forms, that I could still love deeply and fully. But beneath all those reassurances was a gnawing emptiness that would not leave me alone. First, I thought about telling Sarah right away. She deserved to know the truth, after all. She had a right to decide whether or not a future with me was something she still wanted. I imagined sitting her down, holding her hands, and confessing what the doctors had told me. But then another thought would always rush in. What if she leaves me? The idea of losing her was unbearable. Sarah wasn't just my partner. She was the center of my world. Her laughter filled every empty corner of my life. Her kindness had carried me through my darkest days. To imagine her walking away because of something I could not control felt worse than death. I pictured her disappointed face, her dreams of motherhood crumbling before her eyes, and I could not bear it. So I stayed silent. Silence, however, comes with its own weight. Each day that passed, I felt the secret growing heavier inside me. It was like carrying a stone in my chest, one that pressed harder and harder every time Sarah talked about the future. When she mentioned the names she liked for children, when she smiled at babies in the park, when she talked about decorating a nursery someday, my throat would tighten, but I forced myself to smile along. I became skilled at hiding the pain, at turning away just long enough to collect myself, at laughing when inside I wanted to cry. I convinced myself that love would be enough, that maybe she would never notice, that maybe she would be content with just the two of us, with the life we could build together, even if children were not part of it. I told myself that our bond was strong enough to carry the weight of this unspoken truth. But deep inside, I knew I was gambling with the most important relationship of my life. The decision not to tell her haunted me. It wasn't just the fear of being abandoned. It was also the guilt of deceiving the woman I loved most. Every time I looked into her trusting eyes, I felt a pang of shame. She believed in me fully, and yet I was hiding something so fundamental from her. But still fear kept me chained. Fear of rejection, fear of loneliness, fear of losing everything. And so, for 3 long years I carried the secret in silence. I buried it deep inside and built walls around it, pretending it wasn't there. Outwardly I smiled, laughed, and lived as if nothing was wrong. Inwardly I wrestled with the truth every single day. I told myself that love was enough, that as long as Sarah was by my side, nothing else mattered. But no matter how much I tried to believe that, a quiet voice in the back of my mind always whispered otherwise. Because secrets have a way of resurfacing. And I knew that one day the truth I had buried so deeply would rise again, whether I was ready or not. As Sarah sat across from me, her eyes glowing with excitement, she began to speak about baby names. Her voice was filled with joy, almost like a melody, as she listed names she had always dreamed of giving to a child. She laughed softly as she explained which ones she thought were too old-fashioned, which ones sounded too common, and which ones she imagined would perfectly suit the tiny life growing inside her. Every word she spoke was drenched in hope, in the kind of happiness only a mother-to-be could carry in her heart. I tried to match her energy, to be the supportive husband she expected me to be. I curved my lips into a smile, nodding at the name she loved most, even letting out a small laugh when she dismissed the ones she found silly. To her, my smile probably looked genuine. To her, I was the partner sitting beside her, equally thrilled about the new journey we were about to begin. But inside, that smile was nothing more than a mask. Behind it, my world was quietly collapsing. Every sound of her cheerful voice, every glimmer of hope in her eyes, was like a dagger to my chest. Because as she spoke of the future, I was stuck in the present, consumed by one impossible truth. I could never father a child. I had known this for years. It was a reality confirmed by doctors, a reality I had buried deep inside me. And now, here was Sarah pregnant, her hand resting lovingly on her stomach, talking about the baby as though everything was perfect. But nothing felt perfect to me. The more she spoke, the louder the questions grew in my mind. If I could not be the father of this child, then whose child was she carrying? My heart pounded with fear and confusion as the thought echoed inside me. It was a question too terrifying to answer, yet too important to ignore. I wanted desperately to believe in miracles. A small part of me clung to the faint hope that maybe the doctors had been wrong all along. Maybe something had changed in my body. Maybe life had finally surprised me with a blessing I never thought possible. But that hope was fragile, breaking apart under the weight of cold reality. The darker thought loomed over me like a storm cloud. If this child was not mine, then it must belong to someone else. And if that was true, it meant that Sarah, the woman I loved and trusted with everything in me, had betrayed me in the deepest way possible. That possibility made my chest ache and my stomach turn. It was almost unbearable to even imagine. Yet I couldn't stop the thought from circling endlessly. As Sarah continued to dream aloud about names and futures, my mind was spinning somewhere far away. I imagined scenarios I never wanted to see. Was there another man? Did she fall into someone else's arms when I wasn't looking? Was I blind to signs, to secrets she had kept from me, just as I had kept mine from her? The idea of her laughter, her touch, her love being shared with another was enough to break me into pieces. But then again, could I even blame her? I had hidden the truth from her for years. I had never told her about my infertility. I had never given her the chance to choose her path knowing the reality. In a way, my silence had been its own form of betrayal. Perhaps she had found what I could not give her. Perhaps she had searched for something I had denied her by hiding the truth. The battle inside me raged on, love against doubt, hope against despair. I looked at Sarah, so beautiful and radiant, her hands moving gently as she imagined cradling our child. She looked so pure, so innocent, that part of me screamed that she could never betray me, that her love was too real, too deep. And yet, the unshakable truth of my infertility stood between us like a wall I could not climb. By the time she finished her list of baby names, my weak smile was still frozen on my face, but my heart was shattered. I could not bring myself to ask her the question that haunted me, the question that burned in my mind with every beat of my heart. If this child wasn't mine, then whose was it? Night after night, I found myself lying awake in the darkness, staring at the ceiling above me. The silence of our bedroom was heavy, broken only by the soft, gentle sound of Sarah's humming. She would often rest her hand on her growing belly and hum lullabies to the child inside her. Her voice was tender, soothing, filled with the kind of love only a mother could give. It floated through the air like a fragile melody, wrapping the room in warmth and comfort. To anyone else, it might have been the sweetest sound in the world. But to me, it was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Every note she sang touched me deeply. It reminded me of the woman I had fallen in love with, the woman who carried so much kindness in her heart that she could sing to a life not yet born. I would glance at her profile in the dim light, the peaceful smile on her lips, and I couldn't deny the love I felt for her. I loved her more than words could ever describe. She was my partner, my safe place, my everything. Seeing her so happy should have brought me peace. And yet, it didn't. Beneath that love was a sharp, unrelenting pain. Because while she hummed lullabies to her unborn child, I lay there knowing that child might not be mine. My chest ached every night with the weight of that truth. It was as though two emotions, love and betrayal, were battling inside me at the same time, and neither would let me rest. I wanted desperately to believe that Sarah was innocent, that life had blessed us with a miracle, that perhaps the doctors had been wrong about me. But every time hope flickered in my heart, the memory of their words came rushing back. You are infertile. You cannot father a child. Those words had followed me like shadows for years, and now they stood like a wall between me and Sarah's happiness. As she hummed, I would close my eyes and imagine what it might feel like if things were different. If I were truly the father, I would have wrapped my arms around her, humming along, dreaming about the tiny life we had created together. I would have felt nothing but joy. Instead, all I felt was doubt. And doubt is a cruel companion in the night. It whispered to me in the silence, asking questions I didn't want to face. If this child isn't yours, then whose is it? Has she been keeping secrets? Has she given her heart, or her body, to someone else? These thoughts clawed at me until I could hardly breathe. I would turn onto my side, gripping the sheets, wishing I could silence the storm in my mind. But even as those questions tore at me, my love for Sarah never faded. That was the hardest part. My heart refused to let go of her. I still adored her, still wanted to protect her, still longed to believe in us. And yet, the possibility of betrayal hung between us like a ghost, invisible but always present. It poisoned every tender moment, turning joy into sorrow, turning comfort into pain. There were nights when I considered reaching out to her, confessing everything, the truth about my infertility, the doubts that haunted me, the fear that the baby wasn't mine. I thought about shaking her gently awake, telling her everything that was tearing me apart inside. But each time I opened my mouth, the words refused to come. I was terrified of what her answer might be. What if she confirmed my worst fear? What if she looked at me with guilt in her eyes and told me the child belonged to someone else? I wasn't sure I could survive hearing that truth spoken aloud. So instead I stayed silent. I lay there in the dark, listening to her lullabies, my chest aching in ways I couldn't describe. Love pulled me closer to her while doubt pushed me further away. The war inside me left me exhausted, yet no amount of exhaustion could bring me sleep. Each night was the same. Me staring at the ceiling, her singing to the baby, and my heart caught between devotion and despair. The world outside kept moving. Days passed, weeks passed, but inside that bedroom time felt frozen. The lullabies continued, sweet and gentle, while I lay in silence, torn between the love of my life and the secret that was breaking me apart. Over time, I began to grow distant from Sarah. It wasn't intentional at first. It just happened slowly, like a shadow stretching across the room as the sun goes down. I found myself pulling away from her laughter, avoiding her gentle touches, and losing myself in silence when she spoke with excitement about the baby. My heart was heavy with secrets and doubts, and the more I tried to hide them, the more they came between us. Sarah noticed. Of course she did. She had always been sensitive to my moods, able to read me even when I tried to mask what I was feeling. One evening, as she sat beside me, she tilted her head and studied my face with those wide, innocent eyes. Her voice was soft, almost fragile when she asked, "Are you not happy?" The question cut deep. In that moment, I wanted to break down. I wanted to tell her everything, the truth about the doctor's words years ago, the truth about my fear of losing her, the truth about how every night I lay awake wondering whose child she was carrying. The urge to scream was so strong it burned in my chest. I wanted to cry out, "I am not the father. I cannot be. Tell me the truth, Sarah. Tell me whose child this is." But the words wouldn't leave my throat. It was as if an invisible hand was wrapped around my neck, choking me into silence. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My heart pounded, my hands trembled, but still I couldn't speak. Fear held me prisoner. Fear of her answer. Fear of destroying the fragile peace we still had. Fear of seeing disappointment or guilt in her eyes. So instead of screaming the truth, I forced a weak smile and looked away. I mumbled something about being tired, about stress at work, about things that had nothing to do with what was really tearing me apart inside. I watched her nod slowly, her expression still worried but willing to believe me. She wanted to trust me, to believe that everything between us was fine. And I hated myself for letting her believe that lie. But how could I tell her? How could I put into words the storm raging inside me? If I confessed my infertility, she would know instantly that the baby could not be mine. If I demanded the truth from her, I risked shattering everything we had built together. our marriage, our home, our love. It could all come crashing down in a single conversation. And yet, my silence was destroying us anyway. Each day, the distance between us grew wider. She continued to prepare for the baby with excitement, while I drifted further into my own mind, trapped by the secret I carried. She tried to pull me closer with questions, with affection, with gentle reassurances. But the more she tried, the more I recoiled, terrified that closeness would only bring the truth to light. Her question, "Are you not happy?" echoed in my head long after she asked it. I replayed the moment again and again, imagining what might have happened if I had answered honestly. Maybe she would have cried. Maybe she would have confessed something I didn't want to hear. Or maybe, just maybe, she would have surprised me with compassion and understanding. But I would never know because I had let the chance slip away. At night, I stared at the ceiling and thought about all the words trapped inside me. They pressed against my throat like stones, heavy and suffocating, but they refused to come out. I imagined screaming them into the darkness, shouting until my chest was empty and my mind was free. But in reality, I lay in silence, my body still, my heart breaking, while Sarah slept peacefully beside me. The cruel irony was that I loved her more than ever. My distance wasn't because I cared less, it was because I cared too much. I was terrified of losing her, terrified that the truth would take her away from me. And so I chose silence, even though silence was tearing us apart piece by piece. When she asked that question with such innocent eyes, she had no idea of the war raging inside me. She couldn't have known how much I wanted to scream, how much I wanted to tell her the truth. But fear chained me, and the words died before they ever reached my lips. And so, night after night, day after day, I carried the truth alone, growing more distant, while the woman I loved looked at me with concern and confusion, wondering why the man who once held her so close now felt so far away. One evening, after countless nights of silent torture, I could no longer hold the storm inside me. The weight of my secret, the endless questions, and the constant ache in my chest had become unbearable. I had spent days pretending everything was fine, smiling when she spoke about the baby, nodding when she hummed lullabies, and lying awake in the dark while fear ate me alive. But that night, something inside me broke. The silence that had once protected me now felt like a prison, and I knew I couldn't keep the words locked inside any longer. My voice shook as I whispered into the quiet room, "Sarah, whose child is this?" The words slipped out softly, but their impact was explosive. The air between us instantly grew heavy, and the room seemed to freeze in time. For a moment, it felt as though the world itself had stopped turning. The only sound was the pounding of my heart in my ears, so loud it drowned out everything else. Sarah's face changed in an instant. Her smile vanished, her skin paled, and her eyes widened as if I had ripped open a door she had been trying to keep closed. She stared at me, frozen, unable to answer right away. In that silence, I saw everything I had feared. Her lips trembled, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, and in her eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold: guilt. It was not the look of a woman misunderstood or wrongly accused. It was the look of someone who had been caught in a truth too heavy to hide. And seeing it broke me. For years I had carried my own secret. I had hidden the truth about my infertility, terrified she would leave me if she knew. But now, staring at Sarah's guilty face, I realized that secrets never stay buried forever. Mine had led to hers, and now both of us were trapped in a web of silence and lies. Her reaction told me more than words ever could. She didn't deny it immediately. She didn't laugh off my question or reassure me with conviction. Instead, she froze, pale and silent, her eyes filling with emotion she couldn't control. And in that pause, I felt my heart shatter. I wanted her to speak, to explain, to tell me that I was wrong. I wanted her to say that the baby was a miracle, that somehow the doctors had been mistaken, that love had found a way where science had said it couldn't. I longed for her to reach across the space between us, take my hand, and swear that the child was mine. But instead she sat there with guilt shining in her eyes, and every second of silence tore me apart. The room once filled with warmth and dreams, now felt cold and suffocating. The walls seemed to close in around us, pressing down with the weight of unspoken truths. I searched her face for answers, for hope, for anything that could save what we had, but all I found was the reflection of my worst fears. Inside me, love and anger clashed violently. I loved Sarah more than life itself, but the possibility that she had betrayed me burned like fire in my veins. My mind raced with questions. Who was he? When had it happened? How long had she been keeping this from me? Every scenario that flashed through my imagination hurt more than the last. But even through the pain, a part of me wanted to protect her. A part of me wanted to believe that there was more to this story, that maybe the guilt in her eyes was not about betrayal but about fear of hurting me, fear of losing me, fear of the truth coming out. Still, the silence between us screamed louder than any confession. She didn't need to say a word. Her face spoke volumes. And as I sat there, my questions still hanging in the air, I realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The trust we had built, the love we had shared, the dreams we had spoken about late into the night, it all now hung by a thread, fragile and ready to break. And in that fragile moment, I knew that no matter what words she spoke next, the world I thought I knew had already collapsed. The moment the question left my lips, the silence between us became unbearable. Sarah's face was pale, her hands shaking, and her eyes glistening with unshed tears. For a while she tried to hold it in, tried to gather herself, but the weight of my words pressed too heavily on her. Finally she broke. Her body shuddered as sobs burst from her chest, and through those tears the truth came spilling out. Her words were broken, whispered between gasps and cries. She admitted there had been one night. Just one. A mistake. She said she had been lonely, lost in a moment of weakness. She spoke of feeling vulnerable, of being consumed by emotions she didn't fully understand. And though her voice trembled, the words cut into me like sharp blades. She swore it meant nothing. Over and over again, she insisted that her heart had never left me, that it had only been her body that strayed in that single disastrous night. Her tears fell faster as she begged me to believe that I was the one she truly loved, that the life we had built together was real, that this child was not born out of love for another man but out of one terrible, regrettable choice. I sat frozen as she spoke, my mind spinning, my chest tightening with every word. The woman I loved, the woman I had trusted above all else, was confessing to the very betrayal I had feared. And yet, as she sobbed uncontrollably, I saw not only her guilt but also her shame. She clung to me desperately, her tears soaking through my shirt, her entire body trembling as if she were afraid I would let go and walk away forever. I wrapped my arms around her, though my own hands shook violently. I held her as tightly as I could, not because I had forgiven her in that moment, but because I didn't know what else to do. Her sobs echoed through the room, each one stabbing deeper into my soul. My mind told me to push her away, to demand more answers, to unleash the anger boiling inside me. But my heart, broken as it was, couldn't let her collapse alone. Her words replayed in my head on a loop. It was one night. I was lonely. I swear it meant nothing. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could betray me in such a way, especially knowing the pain I carried from my own secret. I wanted to know who he was, why she had turned to him, and how she could ever look me in the eye again. But all I could manage in that moment was to hold her shaking body and listen to her cries. The irony was cruel. For years I had hidden the truth about myself, terrified of losing her if she knew I could never father a child. My silence had created a distance between us, a gap she must have felt but never understood. And in that gap she had made a choice that changed everything. She claimed it was loneliness that drove her to it, that she had needed comfort in a moment when I had grown too distant. Hearing that crushed me even more because deep down, I knew my silence had played a part in the chain of events that led us here. Still, betrayal is betrayal. Knowing that my own choices had contributed didn't soften the blow of her confession. My heart ached with love for her, but it also bled with anger and disappointment. I wanted to believe her when she said it meant nothing, that it was just a single mistake, not a reflection of how she felt about me. But trust, once broken, doesn't return so easily. Her tears soaked through to my skin, hot and relentless, as if her sorrow could somehow wash away the sin. I could feel the desperation in her grip, the way she clung to me as though I was her lifeline. In her trembling body, I sensed both her fear of losing me and her hope that I might somehow forgive her. I sat there torn in two. One part of me longed to pull away, to leave her to the consequences of her choices. The other part couldn't let go of the woman I had loved so deeply, the woman whose laughter and kindness had once been the center of my world. Holding her in that moment, I realized I was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step could mean forgiveness, the other could mean the end of everything we had. And so I held her tighter, my shirt soaked with her tears, my own soul trembling with uncertainty. The truth was out now, and nothing would ever be the same again. My fists clenched tightly at my sides as anger surged through me. I could feel the tension in my muscles, the way my fingers dug into my palms until they hurt. My heart burned like fire inside my chest, every beat reminding me of the betrayal I had just learned. The pain was raw, and my first instinct was to run, to get as far away from Sarah as I could, to leave behind the woman who had broken my trust. A part of me screamed that I couldn't stay another second in that room. Not after the confession that had shattered the world I thought we shared. I wanted to leave. The thought pressed harder and harder against my mind. Walking away seemed like the only way to protect myself, to save what little was left of my dignity. The door was only a few steps away, and with it freedom from the lies and the hurt. My legs ached to move, to put distance between us, to let her tears fall without me there to catch them. My anger told me that leaving was strength, that to stay would mean weakness, that to forgive would mean dishonoring the pain I felt so deeply. But then my eyes fell on her belly. Round and full, it carried the tiny life growing inside her. The child she had been singing to every night. The child she had already begun to love with every fiber of her being. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the gentle rise beneath her trembling hands. In that moment, my anger collided with something far more powerful. The recognition of innocence. The baby inside her had chosen none of this. This little one had not asked to be conceived in betrayal. This child had no part in the mistakes, the loneliness, the secrets, or the lies. It was blameless, untouched by the storm that raged between its parents. And as much as I wanted to hate everything that had led us here, I couldn't direct that hatred toward the child. My heart ached not only with anger but also with something softer. An unexpected tenderness, a deep sorrow for the life that was beginning under such heavy shadows. I imagined for a moment the small fingers, the first cries, the innocent eyes that would one day look up at me without judgment, without knowledge of the pain their existence had stirred. How could I hate someone so pure, so undeserving of blame? The truth was I couldn't. No matter what had happened between Sarah and me, the child was not guilty. The child was simply life. Fragile, precious, and utterly innocent. That realization tore me apart even more. It would have been easier if I could have directed my anger at everything. If I could have walked away without hesitation. But the sight of Sarah's belly forced me to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't just about betrayal or heartbreak. It was also about a child who would one day open their eyes to this world. A child who deserved love, not resentment. Tears stung my eyes as I struggled with the contradiction inside me. My fists remained clenched, my chest still burned. But my heart was no longer ruled only by rage. Compassion had forced its way in. Uninvited yet undeniable. I hated what Sarah had done, but I couldn't hate the life inside her. That innocent being had nothing to do with her choices or mine. It had simply come into existence, and now it was here demanding to be seen, demanding to be acknowledged. I turned my gaze back to Sarah. She was still crying, her shoulders shaking, her hands clutching protectively at her belly as though shielding the baby from my anger. And in that gesture, I saw her not just as the woman who had hurt me, but also as a mother, flawed, broken, but deeply tied to the life inside her. It made everything more complicated. How could I leave so easily when walking away meant leaving not just her, but also the child who had done nothing wrong? The war inside me raged on. My mind screamed for me to go, but my heart whispered that my decision wasn't only about me anymore. It was about love, about responsibility, about the difference between punishing betrayal and protecting innocence. I didn't know what choice I would make, or how I would find the strength to face the days ahead. But one thing was certain. I could not hate the child, because the child hadn't chosen this beginning. Sarah's tears fell like rain, her voice breaking as she begged for forgiveness. "Please don't leave me," she cried, her words raw and desperate. She clung to me as though her entire world depended on my answer, as though my decision in that moment could either save her or destroy her completely. Her sobs shook her body, and the sound of her desperation pierced me deeper than any knife could. My chest tightened painfully. It felt as if a heavy weight had been placed on me, pressing down until I could hardly breathe. My love for her had not vanished, not even after everything she confessed. That was the cruelest part of it all. I still loved her. I loved the woman who had shared her laughter with me, who had been my companion through storms and struggles, who had once felt like the safest place in the world. My heart still ached for her even as it bled from her betrayal. But love alone didn't erase the truth. Every time I looked at her face, I saw not only the woman I adored, but also the woman who had made a choice that shattered the foundation of our marriage. Her betrayal was like a scar, etched deeply, impossible to ignore, and permanent no matter how much I wished it could disappear. I knew that even if I stayed, even if I whispered that I forgave her, the memory of that night would haunt me forever. Her pleas echoed in my mind. "Please don't leave me." They carried fear, regret, and longing all at once. I wanted to respond, to reach out and tell her I would never let her go, that we could rebuild, that love was enough to heal any wound. But when I opened my mouth, the words caught in my throat, because deep inside, I knew this wasn't a wound that could heal so easily. Trust once broken is not easily repaired. It takes years to build but only a moment to destroy. And though she begged, though her tears were sincere, I couldn't help but wonder, could I ever look at her again without remembering her mistake? Could I hold her without thinking of the man who had been there before me? Could I raise this child, knowing every smile and every step would remind me of the night that started it all? The thought of living with that shadow hanging over us filled me with dread. I imagined family dinners, birthdays, and holidays, moments that should be filled with joy. But in my mind, each one was tainted by the betrayal written into our story. I imagined the day the child would look up at me and call me father, and I wondered if I could respond with pure love, or if doubt would always whisper in the back of my mind. Still, when I looked at Sarah, broken and trembling, I saw the depth of her remorse. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't making excuses or trying to justify her actions. She was laying herself bare, vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. Her tears were real. Her fear of losing me was real. And I couldn't deny that a part of me wanted to believe her, to give her the chance to prove that her love for me was stronger than her mistake. But love and forgiveness are not the same. Forgiveness means choosing to let go of the pain, to move forward as though the betrayal no longer defines you. And as much as I wanted to offer that to her, I didn't know if I could. My love for her was undeniable, but my pain was just as strong. They lived side by side in my chest, pulling me in opposite directions, leaving me trapped between staying and leaving. Her cries grew softer, but her grip on me tightened, as if letting go would mean losing me forever. My mind screamed at me to make a decision, but my heart was silent, torn between love and hurt. I loved her, But could I live with betrayal etched permanently into the pages of our story? That was the question that haunted me, the one I had no answer for. And as Sarah begged me not to leave, I realized that forgiveness, if it came at all, would not be born in a single night. It would be a battle. One that would either break us or bind us in ways neither of us could yet understand. A small voice inside me whispered a fragile hope. One I knew was irrational yet impossible to silence. Said maybe the doctors were wrong. Maybe all those years ago, when they had looked at me with pity and spoken the word infertile, they had been mistaken. Maybe their tests, their science, their cold certainty had overlooked something greater, something beyond human understanding. That voice clung to the idea that perhaps, against all odds, fate had chosen to bless us with a miracle. I wanted to believe it. Oh, how desperately I wanted to. For a brief moment, I imagined what it would feel like if Sarah's pregnancy truly was the impossible miracle I had prayed for but never received. I pictured us telling friends and family, everyone marveling at the story of how love had triumphed over impossibility. I imagined holding the baby in my arms, looking down at tiny eyes and knowing, deep in my soul, that life had proven the doctors wrong. The thought filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years, a fragile flame flickering against the cold darkness of doubt. But even as I nurtured that dream, reality shouted louder. The truth was not something I could simply ignore. The doctors had been clear, and their words had echoed in my mind ever since. You will never father a child. That sentence had been carved into my memory like stone, unshakable no matter how much I wished to erase it. I remembered the sterile smell of the hospital room, the serious tone in the doctor's voice, the way my chest had collapsed under the weight of those words. That wasn't a nightmare. That was reality. And reality has a way of drowning hope. As much as I wanted to believe in miracles, I couldn't forget the cold facts. The life growing inside Sarah's womb was real, undeniable, and beautiful in its own right. But was it my child? Every beat of my heart told me it couldn't be. No matter how much I wanted to rewrite the past, no matter how much I wanted to silence the memory of sterile hallways and medical charts, the truth always returned. Science had already spoken. My body was not capable of creating life. That knowledge tore me apart. It felt cruel, almost sadistic, that a part of me still clung to the dream of a miracle while another part of me drowned in reality's harsh grip. It was like standing between two worlds. One filled with light and impossible hope, the other dark and heavy with undeniable truth. And I didn't know which one to trust. I thought about Sarah's glowing face, the way she spoke about the baby with such joy, such certainty that it belonged to us both. I wondered if maybe she too held on to the dream that this child could be mine. Maybe she wanted to believe in miracles as much as I did. But then in the quietest part of my mind, another thought whispered. A darker, sharper thought. What if she knew the truth all along? The tension inside me grew heavier. My heart begged me to believe, but my mind refused. Miracles are rare, and they don't usually arrive wrapped in betrayal. The reality was too loud, too relentless. It reminded me that love does not erase facts, that wishes do not change biology, and that trust, once broken, doesn't magically repair itself with hope. I wanted so badly for the small voice to win, for hope to silence reality, for fate to hand me the miracle I had been denied for so long. But as I stared at Sarah's belly, as I thought of the life inside her, I knew the truth was unavoidable. This wasn't my miracle. This was her secret. This was her choice. And no matter how much I longed for the doctors to have been wrong, no matter how much I wanted to believe fate had gifted me a child, I couldn't ignore what my heart already knew. Reality was louder, and it wasn't on my side. Slowly, with hands that trembled from everything I was feeling, I reached out and placed my palm gently on Sarah's belly. For a moment I wasn't sure what to expect. Silence, stillness, maybe nothing at all. But then it happened. A tiny movement beneath my hand, so small yet so powerful, rippled through me. The child kicked. That simple motion, that little sign of life, carried more meaning than words ever could. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, my eyes wide with wonder. It was the first time I had truly felt the presence of the child. Not just in my thoughts or fears, not just in Sarah's stories or her glowing smile, but real, living, undeniable. The kick was like a message, a reminder that inside her was a new life struggling to grow. A life that had nothing to do with betrayal or lies. In that instant, everything felt different. My heart softened, breaking open in ways I hadn't expected. For so long, I had believed that being a father was about blood, about the connection written in DNA, the undeniable proof that a child was mine. I had told myself that if a baby didn't carry my blood, it couldn't truly belong to me. But with that small kick, with that tiny spark of life pressing against my hand, I realized how wrong I had been. Fatherhood wasn't about biology. It wasn't about who shared whose features or whose name was carried forward. It was about love. It was about showing up, day after day, through sleepless nights, through laughter and tears, through every scraped knee and every milestone. It was about being there when the child needed comfort, guidance, and strength. Blood might create life, but love is what sustains it. As the baby moved beneath my hand, I felt an overwhelming rush of emotions. My chest tightened, not with anger this time, but with something gentler, something like acceptance. I thought about all the fathers in the world who had raised children that weren't biologically theirs, yet loved them as fiercely as if they were. I thought about how many children grew strong not because of shared blood, but because of the love poured into them. And in that moment I understood. I didn't need blood to be a father. I needed love. The realization didn't erase the betrayal, and it didn't make the pain vanish. That scar would always remain, but it gave me something else. A sense of purpose, a path forward that wasn't defined only by bitterness and loss. I could choose what kind of man I wanted to be, what kind of life I wanted to give this child. I could choose to see this not as the end of my story, but as the beginning of a new one. I imagined holding the baby for the first time, watching tiny eyes blink up at me, feeling small fingers wrap around mine. Would the child look like Sarah? Would it carry features of the man who had betrayed me without even knowing? I didn't know. And maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was the choice in front of me, to turn away and let the child grow up without me, or to stay and give this innocent life the love and guidance it deserved. Tears blurred my vision as I kept my hand on Sarah's belly. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as if answering the questions in my heart. I felt a strange peace settle over me, fragile but real. Maybe this was life's way of giving me another chance, not in the way I had wanted, but in a way that tested the strength of my heart. I realized then that I had the power to redefine fatherhood for myself. I could choose to let bitterness rule me, or I could choose love. And as the child moved again beneath my hand, I knew which choice I wanted to make. Fatherhood wasn't about blood. It was about love. And I had plenty of love to give. My voice trembled as I finally allowed the words to leave my lips. They came out soft, almost like a confession, carrying both my pain and my resolve. This child may not be mine by blood, I whispered, my throat tight. But if you'll let me, I will be his father. The room seemed to pause in that moment. The weight of my words filled the silence between us, heavy yet strangely freeing, as though by speaking them I had stepped across an invisible line. Sarah's sobs slowed. The wild, frantic shaking of her shoulders softened into something quieter, something fragile. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen from crying, searching my face for any sign of anger, resentment, or rejection. But instead of pulling away, I stayed. My hand was still resting gently on her belly, and as if on cue, the child moved again. That tiny kick felt like an answer, a small reminder of the decision I had just made. Her tears no longer fell in loud gasps but in soft streams that ran down her cheeks. Silence wrapped around us, but it wasn't the same silence of anger or suspicion that had hung between us in the past days. This silence was different. It carried relief, a fragile kind of hope, and perhaps even the first fragile threads of forgiveness. Inside me, emotions collided. Part of me still mourned the truth that the child wasn't mine by blood, that betrayal had carved its mark into our marriage. That pain hadn't disappeared. It still sat in my chest like a stone. But above that pain, something new was beginning to rise. Acceptance. A choice to move forward, not because the past could be erased, but because the future was still unwritten. Being a father, I realized, was not only about biology. Blood might connect people, but it doesn't guarantee love, loyalty, or sacrifice. I thought about the men I had known who had fathered children but abandoned them, leaving behind nothing but their DNA. And then I thought about the others, men who had stepped into children's lives with no blood connection at all, yet had given them love, guidance, and protection as fiercely as if they were their own. Which of those was the real father? The answer became clear. A father is the one who stays, the one who loves, the one who chooses to take on the role not because he has to, but because he wants to. As I whispered my vow, I felt a strange strength settle over me. This child did not ask for the circumstances of its birth. It didn't ask to be at the center of betrayal, or to come into a world already tangled in pain. All it asked for was love, safety, and a chance to grow. And I realized I had the power to give that. Sarah's breathing steadied as she watched me, her sobs now only faint hiccups. She seemed almost stunned by my words, as though she had expected anger, punishment, or abandonment instead. But what she saw was me, still there, still holding her hand, still choosing not to walk away. For the first time in what felt like forever, her eyes held something other than fear. They held gratitude, and maybe even the beginning of healing. I knew it wouldn't be easy. The road ahead would be full of challenges, doubts, and moments when the past tried to tear us apart again. Forgiveness wasn't something that would come overnight, and trust would take time to rebuild. But at least now we had taken the first step. By choosing to love the child, I was also choosing to try to mend what had been broken, try to find a way forward, try to build a family from the ruins of betrayal. The words I had spoken were more than a promise to Sarah. They were a promise to myself, and to the tiny life growing inside her. I was saying yes to fatherhood, yes to responsibility, yes to love that went beyond blood. And as Sarah's sobs softened into silence, I realized she had heard me, not just with her ears but with her heart. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was full of pain, full of love, full of possibility. And in that silence, I knew my decision had changed everything. Days slowly turned into weeks, and the storm that had once consumed me began to settle into something calmer, though never completely still. I stayed. Every morning when I opened my eyes and saw Sarah beside me, I was reminded of the choice I had made. I hadn't stayed because I had forgotten her mistake, nor because the pain had magically disappeared. I stayed because I chose to. I stayed because walking away might have been easier, but it would have left behind broken pieces that could never be mended. And deep in my heart, I knew I wasn't ready to give up on us. Not yet. Her betrayal still haunted me. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what had happened pressing on my chest. The memory of her confession, the guilt in her eyes, the pain in my heart, it all returned when the house was quiet. I couldn't pretend it had vanished. Trust, once broken, doesn't return in a day, a week, or even a month. It takes time, effort, and a decision repeated again and again to rebuild. But every time I thought about leaving, my gaze drifted to her belly. The gentle roundness that grew more noticeable each week was a constant reminder that a new life was on its way. A life that hadn't asked for any of this. That child was innocent. That child deserved love, stability, and the comfort of a family. And no matter how broken I felt inside, I couldn't deny that the child deserved better than abandonment. So I stayed. Staying wasn't easy. Some days I felt like two people living inside one body. The man who loved Sarah and wanted to protect her, and the man who still felt betrayed, who wanted to keep his heart locked away. These two sides battled each other every day. When Sarah smiled at me with hope in her eyes, part of me wanted to smile back. But another part of me hesitated, afraid that giving in too easily would erase the seriousness of what had happened. Yet, even in my struggle, I began to see small moments of healing. Sarah tried harder than ever to show me her love. She cooked meals, held my hand when I pulled away, and whispered apologies when she thought I wasn't listening. I could see the weight of guilt still heavy on her shoulders, but I also saw her determination to rebuild what had been broken. She wasn't asking me to forget. She was asking me to believe that we could still move forward. And so, little by little, I tried. I reminded myself that love is not just a feeling. It's a choice. Feelings can fade in the shadow of pain, but choices shape what comes after. I chose to stay not because it was easy, but because I believed the fight was worth it. I believed the child deserved to grow up in a home where love existed, even if it was imperfect, even if it was scarred. And maybe, just maybe, choosing to fight for us meant that someday the scars would become part of a stronger story. As the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in myself too. The bitterness, though still present, was no longer the only voice in my head. There were moments of peace, moments when I felt the faint spark of joy as I imagined holding the baby, teaching them to walk, hearing them call me Dad. Those moments reminded me why I stayed. I stayed for Sarah because a part of me still loved her deeply. I stayed for the child because he or she deserved a father who wouldn't turn away. But most of all, I stayed for us, for the possibility that what was broken could still be rebuilt, stronger and more resilient than before. It wasn't about forgetting the mistake. It was about refusing to let the mistake be the end of our story. The day finally came when I first held him in my arms. He was so tiny, so fragile, wrapped in a soft blanket that barely seemed to contain his small body. His little face was calm, his eyelids closed as he drifted in the innocence of newborn sleep. His fingers, no bigger than the stem of a flower, curled loosely, reaching for nothing and yet touching everything inside me. In that moment, as his delicate weight rested against my chest, I felt something I had never thought possible. For months I had wrestled with fear, doubt, and pain. I had asked myself 1,000 questions about whether I could love him, whether I could be the father he deserved. I had reminded myself again and again that he did not share my blood. And yet, all of those questions and doubts seemed to dissolve the second I looked at him. It was as if the very sight of his tiny face had unlocked a door inside me I hadn't even known was there. I expected to feel hesitation. I expected to feel distance, maybe even resentment. But instead, what I felt was overwhelming love. A love so strong, it filled the cracks left in my heart by betrayal. A love that silenced the doubts that had haunted me for months. I had thought I might see another man's shadow in this child's features, that I might forever be reminded of what Sarah had done. But when I looked at him, all I saw was purity. All I saw was a soul untouched by the mistakes of adults, a life that had just begun, innocent and full of promise. He didn't share my blood. That truth hadn't changed. But as I gazed at him, I realized something even more powerful. He carried my heart. Because love is not bound by blood. It's bound by choice. And in that moment, I chose him. I chose to love him, to protect him, to raise him as my own. I chose to give him every part of me that I could, every ounce of love, patience, and strength I had. He didn't need my blood to be my son. He only needed my love, and I had plenty of that to give. As I cradled him closer, I felt his tiny chest rise and fall against mine. The sound of his faint breathing was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. It was steady, fragile, yet full of life. My heart ached in the best possible way, as though it had been broken open just to make more space for him inside it. I pressed my lips gently to his forehead, and for the first time in months I felt peace. The pain of betrayal hadn't vanished. It was still there, somewhere deep inside me. But in that hospital room, holding him for the very first time, I realized that my story was no longer about betrayal alone. It was about love. It was about second chances. It was about a child who had given me a reason to believe again. I thought about all the nights I had stayed awake, wondering if I could ever accept him, wondering if I could ever move past the truth of his conception. And now here he was, nestled in my arms, teaching me the answer without saying a single word. Yes, I could love him. Yes, I could be his father. Yes, I could choose love over resentment. Sarah watched me from her hospital bed, her face tired but glowing with relief. She saw the way I held him, the way my eyes softened, and I think she knew in that moment what I had decided. I wasn't holding someone else's child, I was holding my son. The bond may not have been written in DNA, but it was written in something far stronger. The depths of my heart. As I rocked him gently, I whispered a silent promise to him. You are mine no matter what. I will protect you, guide you, and love you for as long as I live. And with that promise, I knew that something inside me had changed forever. Now, as I sit quietly beside his crib and watch him sleep, I finally understand something I once struggled to believe. His small chest rises and falls with each soft breath. His tiny hands rest near his face, curled gently as though he is holding on to dreams I cannot see. The room is quiet except for his breathing, and in that silence I feel a truth wash over me. One that is deeper than pain, deeper than betrayal, and stronger than blood. Love is not about possession. For so long I thought love meant owning something, holding it tightly, making it mine. I thought being a father meant a child had to share my blood, my features, my very identity. But here he is, my son, who shares none of that and yet belongs to me in every way that truly matters. I realize now that possession was never the point. Love isn't about clinging. Love is about giving. It is about sacrifice. I sacrificed my pride when I chose to stay. I sacrificed the simple life I once imagined, the life untouched by betrayal. But those sacrifices, as heavy as they felt at the time, have given me something greater. Every time I look at him, every time I hear his soft coo or feel his little hand wrap around my finger, I know the sacrifices were worth it. Because love is not measured by what you gain. It is measured by what you are willing to give away for someone else's happiness. It is also about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not forgetting. The scar of what happened will always remain, etched into the story of my life. But forgiveness means I chose not to let that scar define me or him. It means I chose to see Sarah not only for her mistake but also for her remorse, her love, and her efforts to rebuild what she broke. And most of all, it means I chose not to let bitterness poison the bond one now share with this innocent child. And finally, love is about courage. Courage to face whispers in my own heart that sometimes still question, still ache, still wonder what might have been. Courage to face the future knowing the truth will always linger in the background of our story. Courage to say yes to fatherhood, not because it was handed to me, but because I reached for it even when it was difficult. Choosing love in the face of betrayal is the bravest thing I have ever done. As I watch him sleeping peacefully, I realize that family is not built only by bloodlines. Family is built by choices, by promises, by the everyday moments when you show up for one another. Fate may have written a cruel story for me, one filled with heartbreak, lies, and nights of endless doubt. But I chose to write something new on top of it. Fate may have brought me pain, but I chose love. Fate may have tried to break me, but I chose to build. Looking at him, so small and unknowing of the struggles that surrounded his beginning, I feel a quiet peace settle in my heart. One day he may learn the truth of how he came into this world. One day he may ask questions I won't be ready to answer. But when that time comes, I will tell him the most important truth of all. That from the very first moment I held him, I chose him. I chose to love him, to protect him, to be his father in every way that mattered. And that choice was not born of blood. It was born of sacrifice, forgiveness, and courage. So now, as I watch him sleep, I finally understand what love truly is. It is not possession. It is not control. It is not perfection. Love is sacrifice. Love is forgiveness. Love is courage. And above all, love is the decision to build a family even when fate writes a cruel and broken story.